The restaurant went completely silent, every eye turned toward the man standing beside the trembling young woman. She looked like she'd seen a ghost, her designer dress still glimmered under the chandeliers, but her confidence had crumbled across the table. Her father, the billionaire who owned half the city, glared in disbelief. "Who are you to speak here?" he hissed. The man's voice didn't rise. He simply put his hand protectively around her shoulders and said, "Calm and steady, she's with me." For a heartbeat, the world seemed to stop, and that was the moment everything began, the moment when a single dad with nothing stood up for a woman who had everything, and changed both of their lives forever. It started, as most life-changing stories do, on an ordinary evening. Daniel Hayes had just finished his second shift at the auto repair shop. His shirt smelled faintly of engine oil, his palms rough with grease, but his heart, that was pure gold. He wasn't the kind of man people noticed in a crowd. But he was the kind of father who woke up before dawn just to braid his 8-year-old daughter's hair and pack her lunch. After his wife died in an accident years ago, little Sophie became his whole world that night. Daniel was running late to pick Sophie up from her art class. The studio was across the street from La Vue Bleu, an upscale restaurant where people like him never went, where valet drivers earned more in tips than his daily wage. Sophie tugged his sleeve as they passed by the glowing windows. "Daddy, can we see inside? It looks like a palace." Daniel smiled. "Maybe one day, sweetheart." But fate, as it often does, had its own plans, because inside that very restaurant, Elena Carter, the only daughter of billionaire magnate Henry Carter, was sitting at a table surrounded by people who claimed to care about her, but didn't. Elena was 25, beautiful, educated, and lonely. To the world, she was a Carter, heir to a family empire built on luxury resorts and private jets. But behind the perfect smiles and flashing cameras was a young woman suffocating under expectations she never chose. Her father had arranged a dinner that evening with a potential business partner and his son. "You'll thank me one day," he had told her. "Love comes later. Marry for reason first." But Elena didn't want a contract. She wanted connection. That's when destiny did something bold. A waiter tripped, a tray crashed, and chaos spread for a moment. In the confusion, the host mistakenly guided Daniel and Sophie, who had just stepped inside to use the restroom, to a vacant corner table. They didn't belong there. Everyone could tell. Sophie's laughter stood out among the quiet murmurs of the elite. But she didn't care. She was happy to finally sit in a place that felt magical, and that's when Elena noticed them. The little girl's innocent joy drew her attention like a flame in the dark. Then her eyes met Daniel's, warm, kind, a little tired but sincere. He gave her a polite nod, the kind of small courtesy that costs nothing but can change a moment. Minutes later, when Elena's gentleman dinner companion made a cruel joke about children who didn't belong in fine restaurants, Elena's patience snapped. "Maybe they belong more than any of us," she murmured, loud enough for her father to hear. That tiny act of defiance would set the stage for the moment she'd never forget. Because soon after, her father walked over furious, and before she could say a word, Daniel stood. That's when the scene from The Hook happened. "She's with me," he said, calm, grounded, unshakable. The room froze. Elena didn't even know why tears blurred her eyes. For the first time in her life, someone had defended her not because of her last name, but because she mattered, and though they didn't know it yet, this was just the beginning. The next morning, the entire city was talking. Photos had leaked online. Billionaire's daughter defended by mechanic dad. Social media spun wild stories. Some mocked. Some romanticized. But Elena couldn't stop thinking about the man who had simply stood up for her without expecting a thing. Her father forbade her from ever seeing him again. "Do you know what this does to our name?" he shouted. "You will apologize to the press, and that's the end of it." But Elena didn't. Instead, she found out where Daniel worked. She showed up at the garage in a long coat and sunglasses, awkwardly standing between oil drums and dusty cars. Daniel looked surprised but not angry. "Miss Carter, you shouldn't be here." "I wanted to say thank you," she said softly. "And I wanted to help." Daniel wiped his hands. "You already have. You reminded me that standing up for someone still matters." From that day, something gentle began to grow. Not romance at first, but understanding. Elena would bring Sophie snacks and paint sets. Sophie adored her. In time, laughter returned to their little world, something Daniel hadn't realized was missing, but the world around them wasn't kind. Rumors spread that Elena had fallen for a mechanic. Her father's investors threatened to pull deals. Paparazzi camped outside Daniel's shop. Sophie got scared going to school, and Daniel, protective as ever, made the hardest choice. He told Elena to stop visiting. "You have a future, Elena. I don't want to be the reason it burns down." Tears filled her eyes. "You're the only reason I've ever felt alive." But he turned away because love, to him, meant protecting her even if it broke him. Weeks passed. The scandal faded. But so did Elena's light. Then one evening, there was a charity event, the same restaurant where it all began. Daniel was there by chance, fixing a kitchen power issue. Elena was there as the guest of honor, pale but graceful. Her father stood before the cameras, praising her return to form. But as he handed her the mic, Elena looked out into the crowd and saw Daniel near the back, covered in grease, holding a toolbox. Their eyes met. She smiled faintly, then did something her father never expected. She stepped away from the podium, walked straight to Daniel, and said into the microphone, "He once said, 'She's with me.' But the truth is, I'm with him. Because he taught me what respect, courage, and love truly mean." The room erupted in whispers. Her father stood speechless, and for the first time, Daniel didn't stay silent. He took her hand, looked her father in the eye, and said, "Sir, I may not have money, but I'll never let her stand alone again." That night didn't end with applause. It ended with quiet understanding and the beginning of a love story built not on wealth, but worth. Months later, Elena and Daniel opened a small community center together for single parents and children who needed help, a place called the Second Table, because sometimes, the table you weren't supposed to sit at is the one where you finally find where you belong. And in every quiet evening, as the sun dipped low and Sophie laughed nearby, Daniel would glance at Elena, the woman he once defended, with 3 simple words, "She's with me."